All right. So, what I'm going to be talking about today is the Kingpin Act's first ever enforcement on a foreign bank. So, to give you a bit of background, um, the bank that I'll be talking about is called Banco Continental. This image shows that it was around for about 40 years. So it's a very well established bank in Honduran society at that time. And um, and the bottom letters say emprendedores como tú, which basically means learners like you. And the reason I just said that is just so you can have a full context of everything that is being told. Um, and basically, the bank's name translates to Continental Bank, and it is a cautionary tale for Central American banks. It operated in the major cities of Honduras, such as San Pedro Sula and Tegucigalpa, which are the two biggest cities. Tegucigalpa is the capital, and San Pedro Sula is like the industrial capital of Honduras. And even though it was a large bank, prior to this case happening against them, um, now it's completely dissolved. The bank doesn't exist anymore, and its main legacy now is being the first bank to ever be prosecuted by this law. Um, Now, for more context for this law actually is, it was passed in 1999, and to put it simply, it is a way for OFAC to target, well, it gives OFAC the power to target drug traffickers at their core, support banks. If they can restrict those banks from the US financial system, those banks have less of an incentive to work with drug traffickers. And there is a lot of incentive for poorer banks in third world countries to have that pressure to want to grow and to accept money from very concerning angles. But thanks to this act, the U.S. is able to discipline and sanction any banks that decide to disobey the laws of the U.S., especially when it comes to drug trafficking. So, what exactly um, happened with this? So this graphic shows you some protesters, and what it says is "Queremos nuestro dinero," which is basically we want our money. So it's this is to allude of what's to come for this bank for violating the U.S. laws. Um, basically, this bank called Banco Continental assisted Central American cartels by allowing drug traffickers to layer transactions and basically just be able to um, blurry the waters of where exactly they got that money from. The bank actively helped drug traffickers to wash their money and had strong ties to the Rosenthal family. They basically had owned this bank. This was their family bank. And sadly for a bunch of these people who trusted this bank, it was about to all fall into a bunch of pieces. Um, so how exactly were they caught? The U.S. authorities caught them by tracing the transactions of current drug traffickers. Banco Continental kept popping up in cross-border transactions. Authorities soon grew too suspicious of just how many transactions fell through the bank's cracks. It was almost like they were working with them. And that's what soon sparked some investigation. Um, I added this graphic here just to show you how, um, how the amount of ways that drugs can flow through a country like Honduras, especially since it's mainly surrounded by water. And it also has a bunch of land routes through other Central American countries. And since a lot of drugs come from South America, they do need a way um, of going to the U.S. and land routes are just not the most effective, but the least risky. Um, but there's also, it's not just land, there's also air, and there's also sea routes. So it's it's a very complicated issue that's just not solvable by just cracking down on one location. Rather, there's multiple avenues that these drug traffickers use. And I can try to point out, I'm not sure if you guys can see, but San Pedro Sula is like right here, and Tegucigalpa is right around here. So yeah, there's kind of a reason why the banks are very prominent in these two areas. Um, Not just because of their industrial size, but also their location to other land routes and air routes and water routes as well. But moving on, how did they fail? They did not follow the know your customer doctrine effectively enough to stop any criminals into their organization. They had little regard for high risk individuals, nor did they monitor suspicious transactions. They ultimately failed to have customer due diligence, nor um, enhanced due diligence. Lastly, they were not fully independent from the drug trafficking influence. And it's very clear to see that they were benefiting from using the drug money and they did not care, even if something horrible like this outcome was about to be. How did the how exactly did they mask their money? The internal oversight was limited because the owners were eager for growth, even if it meant internal controls were suppressed. The combined This combined with the loose transaction in Honduras led to a very slippery slope. Um, it was it was just Honduras is just not as developed as the U.S. when it comes to um, AML security and just AML procedures, AML enforcement. So um, since they were not able to moderately affect that, a lot of Hondurans ended up getting screwed over. And the structurings of the transactions were very complex through these cross-border transactions. There's just a lot of different countries within this small gap between South America and Mexico. There's Panama, there's Costa Rica, there's Nicaragua, there's Belize, there's El Salvador, and there's Guatemala. I'm not sure if I mentioned Guatemala, but those Central American countries just by themselves blurry the waters since there's not a direct connected Central American bank. It very much muddies the waters, makes it hard for not just Honduras to catch it, but any other participating country to catch it, just because there isn't as strong of a connection since they're not in the same state. So it's more of a police department has to call another police department, and it made it really, really easy for tracking drug related money. It was really it basically was really easy for this to fall through the cracks, and why it did take a while before this family was eventually caught. But when they did get caught, boy did they face some consequences. OFAC concluded that the bank failed to have proper AML procedures. They swiftly sanctioned them in 2015. Their assets were frozen and were completely cut off from the business with the U.S. Additionally, with how dependent Honduras is on foreign investment, they were quick to react. The Honduran banking regulator, um, called the Comisión Nacional del Banco Seguros, forcibly liquidated the bank. It completely ceased operations. So who were these people who were even in charge of it? Well, here they are. What exactly happened to the owners? Pictured to the left is Jamie Rosenthal. He was the former vice president of Honduras. He died shortly after being convicted in 2019. Next to him are his sons Yanni and Yankel. They were faced with jail time and fines. However, Yanni and Yankel returned to the U.S. after completing their sentences. Their business reputations were tarnished regardlessly. Um, they were once elites in Honduran society. Now the empire that they once had, completely toppled over. Um, yeah, these are really horrible people, and they took advantage of their entire community. And it's not just people who have the money. These are just regular working class people. And considering how poor Honduras is, they really were just targeting the poorest people they could find just so they could have a leg up. And so the question is, was the response enough? It became a cautionary tale for Honduran banks to implement AML procedures to not fall into the same mess. However, the outcome was not a complete happy ending. All the innocent employees and customers were negatively affected by the forced liquidation. The FDIC of Honduras was not able to recompensate everyone for the amounts that they lost. They definitely did try to, but there was kind of up to a certain limit, like it is with the FDIC. And even then, Honduras does not have FDIC money. They have a lot poor circumstances to work with, and so did the customers who were negatively affected. Um, it really did bring down the whole country, especially since Tegucigalpa and San Pedro Sula are really the main hubs of Honduras, and if they're struggling, the whole country is going to suffer. So, what are the key lessons in this case? Countries need to cooperate to catch suspicious cross-border transactions. Um, it's kind of the quote I keep hearing in the class that we're all in this together. So the more that these countries, especially countries with a lot of land borders like Central America, where there's just so many countries in one small space, it is important that they work together to help track and find these AML I mean, money laundering criminals. AML and compliance programs need to be independent from management influence. Now, this is important because the management influence was a huge reason as to why all these AML procedures were not followed. If the if the owners had been much more ethical, this event probably would have never happened in the first place. So their ineffective ownership can cause a whole bank to go under. And lastly, OFAC is not one to play with. Even if you're not in the US, but any banks with the US that relies on US money need to follow anti-money laundering procedures, because if they don't, OFAC can smack down hard. So, all in all, these are the sources that I used, and just a big thank you for letting me do this project. This was a great opportunity. I learned so much from this, and and I never thought that Honduras would have such a huge importance in AML history. But I learned something new every single day. Thank you.